Hi everyone, in this video I want to walk you through the download and installation of PyCharm as well as some key differences that set it apart from Visual Studio. If you haven't already watched my Basics of Visual Studio video, I definitely recommend you go watch that first as I reference it a lot in this video. First, let's go over the download and installation of PyCharm. You can just go to Google, look up PyCharm download, first result, and look at this. You have two different options. You can either do a free trial of the professional version of PyCharm, or you can download the open source community version of PyCharm, which you would definitely be familiar with if you are using Visual Studio's community version as well. Very similar concept, it's open source, anyone can use it, it's free. Also, if you look up here, you can see that PyCharm is actually available not only on Windows, but on Mac and Linux as well. Pretty cool. Definitely something that sets it apart from Visual Studio since that is a Windows only platform. So let's go ahead and download the community version of PyCharm. You should see a whole bunch of this information and the download for it starting. Alright, so our download is finished. Let's just start up the setup. Just simple installation instructions. You can choose whether you want a desktop shortcut, whether you want to associate any .py files in your system to automatically open up in PyCharm, which I actually do want to do. I do want to open a folder as a project at some point. I do want to update my path because when I'm going to be installing libraries in the future, I don't want any issue with that. And why not? The launcher as well. So now it looks like I need to reboot my system, so I'm going to do that right now. Alright, so now that the system is rebooted, let's open up PyCharm. So now what you're going to want to do is you want to read the JetBrains privacy policy because of the fact that no, personally, I'm going to say don't send. Here we are right off the bat with access to setting either a dark or light theme. Because I like having eyes, I'm going to choose the dark theme, but you can do whatever you want to do. After choosing your theme, we have three different options here for what plugins we want to install in PyCharm. We have IDEA Vim, we have R, and we have AWS. So after we chose our theme, now we have three different options for different plugins that we might want to use in PyCharm. We have IDEA Vim, we have R, and AWS Toolkit. I've only ever used Vim, aka Vi, in Linux a few times before, so I don't really feel the need to actually install it in here. I'm only going to really use this for Python, so I'm not going to bother installing that. And if you're not familiar with any of these plugins, I'd recommend just not installing any of these either. So I would just go right into start using PyCharm. So here we have a few different options. We have create a new project, open, and get from version control, which is just GitHub related stuff, same as in Visual Studio. We also have the option to do any additional configurations to PyCharm, but again, if you just want to just go right into coding with Python, I would not worry about any of these things. So let's just go ahead and create a new project. So now we're greeted with a whole bunch of different options. First, let's start with location. As you can see here, we have a default location, which is PyCharm projects under pretty much your main folder. I personally like to have all my projects under my documents folder, so I'm going to do that right now. So if you go here to users, go to your name, go down here to documents, and let's go ahead and create a new folder here. I'm going to call it PyCharm projects. And let's click OK, and there we go. Now we're going to have all of our stuff saved into the PyCharm projects folder under documents. Here is where the biggest difference between PyCharm and Visual Studio lies, and that is with the virtual environments. If you recall from my previous video, which is the Basics of Visual Studio, I had a section dedicated to virtual environments. Basically, I talked about how there is a lack of virtual environments in Visual Studio, which means that in Visual Studio, if you have multiple source files within a project, the compiler is going to run them all at once rather than running them isolated. And that is what PyCharm does for us. Using its virtual environments, we can actually run everything in an isolated environment. So that way we can have the same variable names or the same function names in different source files. So let's go ahead and create our project. Every time you open up PyCharm, it's going to show a tip of the day. You can leave that if you want. I'll just leave it up for now, just because some of those tips are actually pretty useful. So right now you may be at this part right here, and it just looks like it's frozen. And you may be wondering why. Well, if you look on this window here, it says Windows may require your approval to install Python. Please check the taskbar. And you can see right here that that is exactly what's happening. So once you approve the installation of Python, everything should be running smoothly afterwards. It just might still take a second. This is really putting a strain on my computer, probably because it's a little bit warm in here. That might be why the fans are spinning up more than usual. So the first thing you might be seeing here is this warning about Windows Defender. This would pop up for me all the time using PyCharm. Every single time I would just click Fix though and configure automatically. And there you go, everything should be good. By the way, every time there's an administrator decision that pops up, my screen recorder isn't able to actually capture it. That's why the screen turns black. Sorry about that. So here's our nice, clean layout. If you want to start dropping in .py files that you already have, you can just drop them in anywhere right here and it'll automatically add them to the project. Otherwise, if you just want to open a new file, it's very similar to in Visual Studio, where you go to the parent folder, go to New, File. Here it's going to ask you to name the file yourself, so I'm going to type source, and you're going to see what happens if I only just type that word. You get a window that pops up saying register new file type association, because since we entered source, it doesn't really know what file it should be looking for because we didn't actually put an extension at the end like a .txt or a .py. So if we want an actual Python source file, let's click on Python and click OK. And here we are. Here's our very first Python source file within PyCharm. For those who may be familiar with Python, you might already be familiar with pip, which is the package installer for Python. Typically, to install a package, you would type something like pip install, and it'd be something like numpy or something. However, I want to tell you about an even easier way to go about installing packages in PyCharm. To do so, you can go to File, Settings, go to your Project Interpreter under your actual project settings, and next you should go to the plus sign right here. And now a new window will open up with all the available packages that you can install into your project. For this project, I want to install something called Selenium. Once you have it selected, just click Install, and it'll take care of everything for you. I just realized I also need something called PyQt5, so let's also install that one as well. Alright, so now that I have my libraries installed, if I want to run this project, since we're working with virtual environments, you can actually run things on a file-by-file basis. For example, I have the frontend.py file set as my front end, and so I want to run that isolated, which is fine because I'm actually importing all of my other files into it. So you have a few different options for how you want to go about running your file. If you already have it open, you can click on the tab and click Run. You can also click on the .py file over here and click Run. Or you can go up to Run, and for the top option, it'll have the file that you're currently on, which is front end. Or you can just click the general Run, and you'll get some options for what you want to actually run. And here we go. If you want to debug a project, it's pretty much exactly the same as it was in Visual Studio. You just click on the left to add in breakpoints, and you go to Debug, and it opens up the debugger. So now you should be greeted with a very familiar sight. Python and C++ are a little bit different, and you'll see why in a second, but on the right we have our variables that we're tracking throughout our debugging process, and on the left we have something called frames, and it's basically telling us exactly where we are in our project. So in the very beginning, we're starting off with line 170 of frontend.py, which is where we're calling our main function, which is what you have to do in Python in order for main to run. Whereas in C++, the compiler automatically knows to run the main function first. If we go to our next step up, we are on main frontend.py line 7, which means that we're currently in the main function of frontend.py, and we're now running under GUI prompt, which is line 7. And so now if we go to our current step, we are on line 25 of GUI prompt, so frontend.py line 25, which is all correct, and we're under GUI prompt. So the frame section makes it very easy to track where exactly you are in your project. So this was my final project for my Python class. Basically, what it would do is it would take a Bandcamp link, you click Bandcamp autofill, it would open up an instance of Chrome, it would open up that link, and it would basically just go into inspect element and find the song, artist, and album and autofill all of these text boxes. And that's exactly what it did. And then you click submit. And when you're done, you just click output table, and now you have all these different songs that you added onto there. So we just added this one, and there it is. When it comes to reaping the benefits of virtual environments, this is a perfect time for me to go over that. The main idea is modularity. You're not only able to choose what files you want to import in your project, but you can also choose any of the functions within those files as well Like for example, I have from grabber class import grabber. And if I don't want to use something like button, I can just delete it and I won't use it anymore. Having the freedom to choose what files or what functions from those files you want to run at any given time is something you'll definitely miss when you go back to Visual Studio, as I have. When it comes to the basics or the essentials of PyCharm, that's mostly what you need to know. I hope this video helped you get over some of the hurdles that come with installing and using PyCharm for the first time. Hopefully you're now familiar enough with the program to start making some awesome Python projects of your own. If there's anything I missed, feel free to let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.